recording.
Nice.
Oh, nice segue.
Yeah. Just in time.
Oh, you're the best, really.
So I'm first. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So starting out with how imposter syndrome has shown up in my life, I mentioned this a little bit in my introduction. I think at least career changing gave me a name for what imposter syndrome was. But when I think about over the course of my career since graduating from college, when I've had it the most was definitely my first professional design job after completing designation. I worked at Allstate as a product designer, and Allstate works in a paired design model, dev and design actually, but what that means is I was sitting directly next to another designer all day, every day, sharing a screen, working in Sketch together, and he was also a graduate of the program, but he had graduated about a year and a half before I did, and so I immediately shrank, seeing how good he was, how fast he was. He's a very naturally talented individual, and so I got so in my head. I mean, there was literally a period of about 3 months where I found it difficult to speak up in meetings or speak up at all, where I had a hard time believing that they had seen my resume and interviewed me. I was like, they were there, right? They know that I don't know all of these Sketch shortcuts and I don't know all of these research techniques they're talking about and all these things. So was extremely in my head about it for a really long time, but it helped once other people I was working with started talking about their own experience, and it was almost this immediate weight off my shoulders because I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are thinking this too? You're literally feeling the same thing I'm thinking, and then I felt the courage to talk about it too, and it helped a lot, and I relied heavily on my other cohort mates too to kind of talk about them as they were going through their first experiences after the program too. So yeah, that was my experience. That's part of my experience with imposter syndrome, probably my biggest experience with it to date. But then also, I'm going into my two things in my positive thing, right? Okay. My two positives are that I'm a UX architect and I'm a yogi. I've been doing yoga for 7 or 8 years and I'm really passionate about it. And then I'm actually going to share two closeted things because I did the same thing you did, where I picked one that I was light on the vulnerability scale. And that would be that one of my biggest things I'm self-conscious about my body is that I have big feet. And so I constantly trip over flat surfaces, and I'm not talking a little stumble, I'm talking a full on, I gotta put my arms out and catch myself. So I'm always really I don't like to talk about that.
I feel you.
And then on a probably level of 10 vulnerability scale, I would say I still feel uncomfortable calling myself a designer. So.
Oh, wow. You are a designer. Okay, I think it's my turn. So I guess I'll start with my 3 things. So one of the things is I'm a side hustler. The second one is that I'm really excited about or proud of is that I danced on the Park West stage earlier this year. So that was really cool. It's a concert venue on the north side. And then my closeted thing is that, I'm often afraid that I'm going to get to the end of my life and have regrets about the things that I didn't do. So that's something that I try to keep in mind as I try to do things. So, okay. So my story. So I told you guys a little bit earlier about how I changed careers as well. So to set the stage, I was working at McCormick Place. I was managing the infrastructure team there, and we configured internet for all events. So you can imagine it was hell, right? It was, my internet doesn't work. What do you mean my internet doesn't work? So after doing that for about 2 years, I also had a loss in my family, and so I feel like those things tend to make you wake up and they make you start thinking about stuff, about life, all that kind of stuff. So I was basically like, okay, I'm not happy, I'm not feeling fulfilled, I feel completely empty inside. I need to do something else. I don't know what that is, but I need to do something else. And sometimes when you put those types of intentions out to the universe, it starts And so I ran into a friend at an event, and she had just been appointed to manage this new program for women entrepreneurs at 1871 called Wisdom. And she says, I need someone to be my partner. She's like, I think you'd be great. And I was like, I'm pretty sure this is the first thing I said. I don't have experience with startups, right? Like, it's like, I didn't think about any of the things I did have. I just thought about the one thing I didn't have. And she was like, well, you can learn it. You can learn that. Like, you have a passion for women. You have a passion for helping them and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, she's like, I think you'd be great. And so I was like, yeah, no, I don't think so. And, but she was just like, well, just let me know if you want me to send over your resume. So I went home and then I started thinking about it, right? And I'm like, well, what's the worst that can happen? They say no. I still have a job. It's okay, But like literally, like I just kind of had to understand, like, okay, I really had to sit there and think about, okay, if I put my name in this hat, like what is the worst that can happen? Because I was essentially opting myself out without even giving myself a chance because of the one piece of experience I didn't have. And for the women in the room, you can possibly identify with this. Like, you often feel like when you're looking at jobs or applications or whatever, if you don't check all the boxes, you're not gonna apply. And so that was kind of what I was doing in that moment. So that's kind of the biggest imposter syndrome story that I can think of. But ultimately, I basically sent over my resume and got the job, right? And so I could have easily not gotten the job just because of fear and because of the voice in my brain telling me, Jess, you don't have startup experience. And now I have a little bit more than I did then.
I shared my stuff earlier, but I'll tell my story. Imposter syndrome shows up all the time. It showed up this afternoon. It showed up in my interview yesterday, and it showed up 5 times during my interview yesterday. But when it was when it really was messing with me was back in 2015 when I was living in New York City. I got to a place where I was helping a couple of companies start up. One company was based in Austria, one company was based in New York. And I was also producing, at that time when this was all hitting me, I was also producing 10 shows a week and at night. So I was very, very busy, and like I said in my high level introduction, I was feeling completely alone, like nobody understood what I was doing, or I didn't understand what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I mean, I was producing a show where Janine Garofalo literally came to a show that I was freaking producing, and I was just like, I don't know why I'm here. Like, why is anybody even trusting me to even guide them to, do these shows and stuff? And that's literally running in the back of my head, to the point to where I was having a nervous breakdown, and I actually ended up packing all my stuff and leaving New York City without telling anybody what was going on with me. And man, that was a very hard time for me, because all the accolades and Janine Garofalo, what? I'm just Jerry, right? She's there. I'm doing shows where there's like 200 people coming in to see a bunch of comedians make people laugh, and I still didn't get why anybody trusted me. It didn't make any sense in my mind. And it as I look back on my life, I realized that it was there in high school when I was voted most popular in high school and most spirited in high school, and they took most popular away from me because the star football player didn't get any superlative, and so they had to give him something. And I didn't want either of them. I didn't want it, because I was like, there's so many other people who could deserve this. I'm just Jerry. I'm just here to help. Mm-hmm. And it just keeps going back and going back as I go back into my life. And even to this, now that I've discovered what imposter syndrome is and tools and techniques, though it's still there, I'm able to actually step with it, because I've come to find, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I've come to find that anytime that fear is coming up for me, it's actually an opportunity for me to step in and see what's on the other side. And typically what happens on the other side is actually way better than the idea that you had in mind. One of my jobs, when I was working in New York, I started off as just as a delivery guy. It was just a part-time gig, like side hustle, was just gonna do that. And the owner of the company was recognizing me for the work that I was doing, and she was saying that how her clients would talk positively of me, and like she was saying that I was the face of the company. Literally, I was the only person in the company that people actually saw. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm just delivering plants, leave me alone, right? And she goes, Jerry, I want you to do biz dev for us. And I said no to her 4 freaking times because I just couldn't believe, like you, I was like, I don't know anything about business development. I don't know anything about making people feel good about themselves. It's like bullshit. Obviously I do, right?
You do.
Thank you. Thank you. But I didn't believe it. And that's the thing. It's like, I'm not, even though everybody is saying how good I am or how well I've done, I couldn't hear it. And as soon as somebody, and now here's a kicker, as soon as somebody said that I did suck or that I didn't do well, like, oh, tell me more, please, tell me how bad I am, right? I would just like, give me the negative information because I can agree with that, right? And that's not a very good state of being. And so now I've come to know what it is, and though it's still there, I realize that one, I'm not the only one who has it. It's been well researched for 30 to 40 years. I found, and in my research, I found that the more people actually talk about their vulnerabilities and talk about the things that they're struggling with and asking for help and teaching others, the less there would be a stigma about it, and people can easily identify it quicker and move beyond it and all that good stuff. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
We're gonna move on to the presentation.
Yeah.
The screen set up.
I'm so nervous.
Yeah, Nicole, you're.
I used to like partner with her at some different events and stuff.
Oh, yeah, oh, cool.
Yeah. Miss Tao here. That's awesome. Is that, I just texted her actually.
Could I get somebody to turn
Like a couple weeks ago,
off
so
the
I
lights?
was doing it, talked to her and all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Thank
it's
you.
Were you at the conference?
fun, no, the one that she just did.
No, it was years ago. Big, like, one up here. Your hair.
Yeah, I was there, I did a side hustle talk actually.
Oh, no way. Yeah, I'll definitely go.
Oh,
I
cool.
volunteered.
Oh, good deal.
Here's her.
Okay, 1 second.
Apparently I need to clean the filter.
John Steinbeck.
John Steinbeck, right?
I don't know how to get rid of that, so.
It's fine. I think
Okay.
we might need to clean the filter.
You're good to
Sorry. This is one of my favorite authors, John Steinbeck, and this is one of his quotes. I'm not a writer. I've been fooling myself and other people the whole time. Imposter syndrome. So, the fraudulent fraud that you think you are. Just like, take a look over there at that little comic strip. XKCD, if y'all don't know it, y'all should. Y'all are all designers and engineers, so that's definitely a blog comic that I love and enjoy, even though I'm not one of you. So, a quick definition of imposter syndrome is it's a psychological pattern which individuals doubt their accomplishments and have persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Or put it another way, holy fuck, I think people are gonna figure this out. Let me just hide over here in this corner. even though the external signs are showing you that you are doing awesome, that you are helpful, that you are there for others, your mind is telling you otherwise. Your mind is playing tricks on you. Today, I'm going to do this very short presentation. I've broken it down from an hour and a half presentation to 10 minutes, hopefully less, so we can open the floor for Q&A. But in my research, there's an author named Dr. Valerie Young, who has written an awesome book on this subject that I think is worth checking out. It's called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women: Why Capable People Suffer from Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It. Women aren't the only ones that suffer from imposter syndrome, but when the research was done back in the late 70s and early 80s, the people who were open to talking about it were women. And through the research, they've come to find that it's everybody. It's 70% of the population. I don't know what the population is. I'm going to assume it's America or Western civilization deals with this syndrome. We have people like Maya Angelou, John Steinbeck, like we just read, Tom Hanks, Michelle Obama has talked about it. You name it, they've felt it, and it's typically amongst high achievers, people who are go-getters, people who achieve a lot of things, get a lot of awards, obviously, but you don't have to necessarily be Michelle Obama to deal with this. You could just be someone who's pivoting from one career and becoming a UX designer, for all I know. But there are some competencies that people with imposter syndrome have. And as we talk about this, I'd like you to consider which of these 5 you might be resonating with. And you might not, it could be more than one. So don't be so quick to think it's you, or that's the only one for you. So we're gonna go dive into the perfectionist. These are the folks, and raise your hand if you think you're the perfectionist. You're the one who just, everything's gotta be perfect before you can actually say, okay, it's done, right? They set high goals for themselves, and the doubt comes in about measuring up, about keeping the metrics. They tend to be control freaks, so they have a tendency of working with teams, and when they do work with teams, they have that feeling of, fuck it, I'm gonna do this myself. You know, it's like, I can do this better, I can do it faster, I can do it whatever. And then success is rarely satisfying for them. So even though they might even achieve that high goal that they set for themselves, it wasn't enough. They could have done better. I could have done better, right? So that's a perfectionist. Now, we're gonna talk about how a perfectionist might be able to look at the world a little differently so they can help overcome imposter syndrome. So rules for the perfectionist, again, this comes from Dr. Valerie Young. She says that you can use these ideas and some more, but these were key for me, was that you have to understand that perfectionism actually is inhibiting you from getting to the success that you are looking for. And it sounds counter to a perfectionist, that sounds foreign, but it's true. You don't need to be perfect in order to get the job done. You just need to get the job done. Sometimes good is good enough, and your perfectionism actually is impacting others. Again, like I said before, perfectionists have a tendency of being control freaks. They have to micromanage every little insular thing that's going on a certain project. And they kind of have a removed sense from their team, so they're not being empathetic, if you will. They're not considering the fact that they are working with other people. So think about this. Non-perfectionism needs to be embraced. So maybe that could look like making these columns and talking about your flaws and talking about your SWOT and things like that. Again, I'm moving really fast. I had to really truncate this presentation, so forgive me. All right, so Superwoman, Superman. These tend to be like perfectionists, but they're not. These are the people who think of the idea of how many things I do is what deems me a success. Not how well I did them, but how many. Remember my story where I was sharing that I was working for 2 different companies, I was producing 10 shows a week. That would put me in this list. And no moment in time did I ever think that I was perfect at any of the jobs that I was doing, but I had to prove that I could do it, so I would say yes to every single thing that was coming my way. And as fun as they were, it was stressing me out and I was not paying attention to me. So I'm convinced that people think I'm a phony, and the only way I can deal with people not thinking I'm a phony is by doing more things and taking it on. Moms, working mothers have a tendency of, oh wow, that's fast. Okay, working mothers have a tendency of dealing with Superman, Superwoman, and so things that Supermen, Superwomen need to think is it is okay to say no. You are allowed to say no. You can delegate tasks to other people. Ask for help. When you take the time to just slow down and really assess what's going on in your life, you'll start to notice the things that really matter in your life and actually put more focus onto those things. So your skills that you put into all those 10,000 projects could actually be honed in on maybe 5, right? And then this is a key one for me because I have a 2.5-year-old son, is being this person is actually a bad behavior trait that your kids will actually end up learning. They'll start to think that doing more things is a good thing. So things to consider. The natural genius. They believe they need to be a natural genius. It's like the only way you can do this task or fill out that job application is by being like, oh yeah, this is the perfect job for me. That's why I'm going to do it. They judge themselves based on getting things right on the first time. Anybody here like that? It's just like, oh yeah. And if you have to do a revision or something like that, you think you're like the worst in the world, right? Yeah, it's not a very helpful way of being. And ways that you can deal with this is just understand that effort, effort trumps ability, and what that means is just give it a go. Just go for it and understand that learning from any mistake that might happen is part of the success and part of the path that you're going down. Challenges are often opportunities in disguise, so stepping into the fear helps out with that. And real success always takes time. You know, it takes time to build a company. It takes time to build an app. It takes time to do anything. It takes time to cook eggs. You know, you can't. You have to learn from mistakes. You make that part of your process. The soloist. This is also me. The soloist feels as though asking for help reveals their phoniness. They firmly feel that you need to accomplish things on your own, and they believe they shouldn't need help. And only true achievement are those that are reached on their own. So this is kind of similar to the perfectionist. What makes this different than the perfectionist is they typically won't work on teams. They won't ask for help, and they won't look for mentorship or anything along those lines. They are solo, or a rugged individualist. I am definitely that. I've been walking around for 36 years telling everybody that I am a lone wolf, and that's one of the most bullshit things I've ever said in my life, because it's not true. I'm not. I like being around people. So, rules for people who are soloists. Any soloists? Anybody think that they might be a soloist? One? Cool. Funny enough, you're solo. I'm kidding. All right. I told you I'm a dad, so I got dad jokes for days. All right. Competent people know how to ask for what they need. It's all right to ask, all right? Smart people seek out people who know more than they do. Henry Ford is known for this. I can't quote him, but I can paraphrase. When he was starting the Ford Motor Company and he was coming up with the assembly line, he said that he would build a mastermind of people who were smarter than him to reach out to come up with the ideas that ended up building what we know as the assembly line, which I guess is not a thing anymore. Well, it is a thing, but everything's shifting in this new millennium. Incompetent people know it's okay to build on the work of other people. So, you know, stand on great people's shoulders, right? Understand that people have gone through this. I understand that a lot of you, that UX, UI is a fairly new thing. I think it's what, 10 years old if that? And everything is changing. It's constantly moving. So to be a soloist, especially in this field, is not necessarily beneficial to your field. It's actually better for you to work with other people and help lift other people up to get to the plateau that you have found yourself in, so you can then go to the next plateau that you're looking for in your career. And lastly, I have the expert. The expert bases their competence on what and how much they know or can do. They believe they will never know enough, and their fear of being exposed as inexperienced or unknowledgeable terrifies them. I wrote that down twice because it needed to be said, I guess. So the expert is the type of person that's like, let me do a little bit more research. Before I execute on this. I'm guessing there's an expert in the room. Yeah, one, at least one. The expert is the person that probably has 10 books on a shelf of research that they need to do. They have the spreadsheets, they have all the intricacies that need to happen before they can say yes to something. And that person just needs to understand a couple things about the world. There is no end to knowledge, so you're constantly learning. There's always something to learn. Almost done. You don't need to know everything, and you just need to be smart enough to find somebody who does know everything, right? So working with a mentor, working with an actual expert can help you with your expertise, but in the process of you doing your task. And even if you don't know something, you can still project confidence. So for example, as I'm giving this presentation, I am no Valerie Young. I'm not a researcher. I'm just a guy who speaks from experience. But I do harbor a lot of confidence because I enjoy speaking in front of audiences. I enjoy helping people, and that gives me confidence. So if you can find the things that make you confident and use those as your backbone, then you can actually put the book away for a second and actually just get the task done and learn from the mistakes that are surely to happen. Or sure to happen, I should say. So, again, these are the 5 competencies of imposter syndrome: the perfectionist, the superwoman, Superman, the natural genius, the soloist, and the expert. We talked about the impact that it has on people. I forgot to take this part out, but some references. Mo said that he's going to have some resources for folks to check out, but in case y'all wanted to dive in a little bit more, honestly, Google is the resource. I mean, there's so much information on it. TED has a couple of talks on it as well. There's an awesome cartoon that is like 5 minutes long. That's really, really high level, but really good. And Dr. Valerie Young's book is a really good read. I highly recommend it. And there it is. And that's me. So if anybody has any questions and they want to dive a little deeper, I can help guide you through that, maybe point you in some good directions and all that stuff. I love to help again. And if y'all know anybody who's ever in need of somebody to speak on this topic, I'm raising my hand. I would love to help. So please check me out, jerryomeka.com. Thank you very much. I appreciate y'all.
Okay, so we can turn on the lights. We're gonna reconfigure the room a little bit for the panel in the last section of the event today.
Wow, that was fast. High fives are kind of fun.
We're trying to get a bunch of information in 10 minutes. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's usually an hour presentation, so.
Yeah, so
yeah.
you did well.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, time, there we go. Okay, so I have a couple questions and then we'll open it up to the room for any questions you guys might have. Okay, so first question, and it's open to any of you if you'd like, and if pass, if not, and we'll move on. So for each of you personally, what do you think are the main causes or triggers of imposter syndrome, and what contributes most to this feeling or experience?
I mean, I guess I can start. I think for me, it mostly started because I was often the woman in a lot of male-dominated spaces, and so I think that already kind of affects you because it's like, there's no one else here. You know, am I different? Am I supposed to be here? I think is mostly the question that you're asking yourself. And I think that's where it shows up for me. What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
What are causes or triggers? So what,
Okay.
or what contributes most?
Yeah, I think it's that, but I think it's also just being in a new space, right? So one of the things I've learned just by dealing with this is to try to put myself in more uncomfortable spaces, because I think then that activates a muscle so that it's like, okay, I can be okay with being uncomfortable with things not being figured out. Because a lot of it is, I feel like I've had most of my imposter situations in new situations, starting new jobs, changing careers, and so some of it is just growth, and growth is okay, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing. And I think mostly it's really about recognizing that what you are feeling is imposter syndrome, so that then you can kind of essentially sit down with yourself and say, okay, self, what's happening here? Like what is the thing that's keeping me stuck? Like what is, so that you can kind of walk back from that and then see, okay, is it just because I don't have enough skills? Is it something else? Is it just the newness of the situation? If that's the case, then that might wear off. Is it something else? Do I need to get outside help? So that's what I would say.
Yeah, similarly for me, a trigger is definitely any time in my life I've asked myself, who do you think you are, to ... fill in the blank. So not just professionally, but I've chosen to travel by myself a couple of times, the first being right after college before I started my first job. And I remember specifically sitting on the plane, looking out the window, being like, who do you think you are to go all the way to Southeast Asia and travel by yourself? And then continued on with my first role. I was a manager in training, so I managed a lot of different departments in the company, and each 6 months I had to move to a different department. It's like, who do I think I am to lead these people? So that's my first tell, but also just recently having done more research on it and giving a talk a couple of months ago on imposter syndrome was when I really started to understand more about how it's associated with achievement, and I traced that back and I was like, oh yeah, anytime I was actually achieving something or doing something I was proud of, it always started with imposter syndrome every single time. Again, most recently true with just starting a new job 3 weeks ago and going from a product design designer at Allstate to UX architect at Strata. My roles are, there's overlap, but some things are going to be different. And again, I'm like, who am I to think I can do ... So that's my tell.
My tell is it's who do you think you are to do that. I was an improviser in New York, and I'm actually thinking of times right before I would walk on stage. I mean, I would perform with some of the best comedians who are on television today, and I would just be like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, and I would then, for me, it stems back to my childhood, actually. So I'm a first generation Nigerian, and I didn't become a doctor and I didn't become a lawyer. I've always been an artist and a goofball, and my dad has always been like, business track, get your ass over there, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna do art. So anytime I was doing shows or I had a recital or whatever, my dad never showed up. He just didn't come, and so that ended up rooting in my brain that no matter, I have to prove to him how awesome I am at doing these things that I love, that I can be a success at doing art, and just as successful as Kalechi and whatever, or my dad. And so I love him now, but it's one of those things that it rooted in as a child that no matter how much I did, it wasn't going to be enough to prove that I'm awesome, and then I guess you just forget that those traumas, and then you go into life thinking that that's just true, that you aren't successful and that you won't be successful. So, I can relate to the race thing a little bit, but that's definitely not what triggers for me. It's definitely my dad's voice in the back of my head saying that that's not enough. You're not doing business, so that's not good. Okay.
So we've talked about the causes and the triggers, and obviously you're here speaking in front of everyone here because you've recognized that imposter syndrome is a thing. There's words for this experience. So I'm wondering from you guys if you could break it down a little bit, like what are the thoughts or feelings emotionally, or feelings in your body or urges or anything that are like tangible attributes of experience that you, when you have them, know, oh, this is imposter syndrome. So what are the granular things that you can point to that you have internally that can help you be aware that you're having it?
Anytime I find myself saying, thanks, and like exactly like that, there's an my body wants to retreat. I just want to run complete 180 the whole other direction. It's taken me a long time to take compliments. So any congratulations that comes my way, I actually don't believe I deserve, and my body literally just wants me to just turn. That's how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest thought definitely being the who do you think you are to ... and then one I mentioned earlier of like really wondering like, did they actually look at my qualifications before they hired me? That was a big one at Allstate, like looking back where I was just like, and then just like the feeling in my body is just pure anxiety. And I mentioned a little bit about this too, like not being able to speak, like it almost is like somebody is holding my throat and I can't breathe or speak, which is fun. And yeah, I mean, that's generally probably it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Really just like that circling, like it's a spiraling, right? It's like a lot of the same or similar thoughts over and over again.
Yeah, I would agree. I think for me, it's always like, I'm afraid someone's gonna knock on the door and be like, you're a fraud! Along with the anxiety. It's like, it's like they finally figured it out, you know? So yeah, that's what I would say.
I would say one more for me too, and I just thought of it because I'm partially the expert that you explained, that I go into, I gotta take a course on that, or I gotta get 5 books on it, or I gotta get my master's or something.
That's a good point.
So that's also a big tell for me too.
I find myself curled up on my couch a lot. So whenever I'm dealing with imposter syndrome, so instead of actually like trying to find research and books and this and the other, I'm just like, no, like why does the world hate me? And I'll binge. Like I rarely watch TV, but anytime I find myself watching Netflix for more than like 3 hours, it's probably because I'm hiding. So yeah.
Well, if we follow that train of thought, then for me it's probably drinking a lot
We're doing both, right?
Or doing both.
Yeah.
Or doing both, yeah.
So if you're recognizing that you're feeling these symptoms, you have the urge to drink, and then you say no, you have the urge to watch Netflix, or all of the above together in a wonderful combination. What is the hardest part of dealing with it? So what has been successful from a behavior, from an action standpoint that's been healthy, and what gets in the way? First of all, what are the things that you do to deal with it, and then what gets in the way? What's the hardest part of actually doing that thing you know you need to do?
For me, the hardest part is admitting that I need help. That's without a doubt the hardest part. I just don't, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, it's hard for me to admit to people that I don't know what I'm doing and I need help. Even though other people will come to me asking me for help, and I'll gladly give it to them and be there for them and all that stuff. But for me, the other way around, no man, I'm like, nah, I'll figure it out. I'll just, surely the OA will tell me. Right? So.
Yeah, I would say same thing. Like vulnerability, in my opinion, is definitely a muscle that I am trying to get better at, but still find really difficult. But I mean, it did help me initially, and still does. Having 2 or 3 people really close to me that, one who went through designation as well, so definitely knows and knew what I was going through right out of the gate, so that I could constantly slack her and we could both share our feelings. But it's still hard, so I think just taking every opportunity to be vulnerable, like today, all of that is the thing that helps me the most.
Same. I would echo what Rachel and Jerry said. Especially the asking for help part. I think I definitely identified the most with the Superwoman complex, and like it's just so hard. I remember one time where my mom's like, well, what do you need? And I'm like, can you help me look for apartments? And she's like, yes. Why didn't you ask me that 2 months ago? And I'm just like, it's not an easy thing for me to do. It's not my default setting. And, to that point, like, I think one of the things that has helped me, granted, there's some things I think I'm more vulnerable about than others. But I think something that does help me is just having that close knit of friends where it's like, I just got this job. I don't think they know that they hired the right person. So, having that conversation, getting it out loud instead of it just swirling in my head, like, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, like, something's wrong here. That has also been helpful for me.
One tool that I've actually recently started practicing is I meditate now. I've been an avid meditator for a long time, but I'm doing a new technique of meditation where I actually every morning I actually sit about 4:30 in the morning. I'm not saying y'all need to do this, but I wake up. I have a son, so I have to do. That's the only time. So I at 4:30 in the morning I sit and I just watch my thoughts. I just watch the show and just watch it go by, and then I notice the ones that start triggering my body or the ones that want to build on top of itself, especially the negative ones. And what I end up doing is, when I find a thought that's negative, I actually just say I love you to it, and if it's still there, I just keep saying I love you to that thought, and then eventually it just kind of just disappears. And it's interesting because all of a sudden I'm able to see the world a little bit differently, because the thought that's in there is something I planted in there at some point in time that I've now subconsciously been believing about myself. And so I've been finding that observing my thoughts, just being uncritical, unconditional to my thoughts has been helping me out a lot.
Easier said than done, but definitely.
I know,
Really
definitely.
good practice to have.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. So, final question for me, and then I'm going to open up to you guys to get ready. If you notice a friend or a colleague, family member, someone close to you is experiencing something that could be imposter syndrome, what would you recommend that people do to support others? We talked about maybe what you've done in the beginning was getting in the way, but how can you be a positive, constructive force in regards to imposter syndrome?
Just talk about it. I mean, easy. To me, that's like, it's the hardest thing to do maybe, but it's like the most impactful thing to do, because once people I was working with or people who I looked at and I was like, you're freaking awesome, and they were like, I feel like an imposter, then I was suddenly like, oh, now I feel like I can talk about it, or now I just feel like I'm not the only one, right? Like sometimes with imposter syndrome, I think that's the biggest thing, is you feel like you're the only one going through it, and you're not. There's no chance that you are, so just talking about it for sure.
I'll second that. This weekend I was talking about this presentation, that I was going to be giving this presentation this week, and my friend Lydia was just like, what? That's a thing? And I was like, yeah, it's a thing. She's like, oh my God, I didn't realize that was a thing. Like, this is great. Can I come to the presentation, all that stuff? So you might not even know somebody who has imposter syndrome. So just sharing who you are with other people helps other people. Even if they don't have imposter syndrome, they might know somebody who does, and on and on and on. So it's like, the more people who are identifying with this and trying to get a grasp of it, and the more vulnerable you are, the more helpful it is for you and your friends and so on and so forth.
I love that. I definitely think we need to talk about it more. The other thing I would suggest too is remind your friend or family member about their track record, right? Like, they've done difficult things before. They've been in new circumstances before. They've gotten through it. And sometimes I think we forget that. Like, we forget how far we've come. And so one of the things I try to remind myself and others too is, like, don't compare yourself to all these other people. Compare yourself to yourself, like even 3 months ago, even 6 months ago, because you have experienced growth even if you don't think you have, and that will help you feel a lot more confident in your ability to just kind of conquer whatever this new thing is.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Oh, also remember, it's not a lion that's going to eat you. It's just your mind. You know? So.
Just the cheekiness.
So, anyone have any questions?
How do you balance dealing with imposter syndrome but still maintaining like a sense of humbleness and being humble? Because like for me, I think like a lot of my imposter syndrome kind of rooted in a perversion of being humble, where like I've been so cognizant about like not being overconfident that I convinced myself that I'm really, like, that wasn't a great achievement, or like I really didn't deserve this or any of that. And so like with dealing with it, how do you kind of still maintain that sense of being humble but in a healthy way?
That sounds like the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what is it, false humility or something like that, right? Where it's, you know you did well, but you can't really admit to the world that you did well. That's fine, you know, as far as I'm concerned. It's when it gets crippling is what you're asking about. Yeah, for me, the balance of humility and patting your own self on the back is key. I think making a list of things that you're grateful for can help with that. You know, like noticing how you've helped others is also a way to look at it. So maybe, you know, just recognizing in your own self, it's like, you know what, no, I did do a good job. How do I know I did a good job? Steve and Becky and Szechuan were all having a good time. Szechuan. What is that?
Mulan's coming out soon.
Isn't
Yeah,
it like
maybe
a
I'm
Chinese
hungry.
restaurant or something?
No, I don't know what that was. Weird. I try to speak in threes, so forgive me for, that's weird. All right, so, just, yeah, being grateful, like making a list of things that you've done great. To actually piggyback on what she was saying earlier, if you can keep a log of achievements that you have made, and anytime you're feeling a certain way, you can just go back and like, oh, that's right. Or if anybody has like a testimonial for the work you've done, you know, ask them if it's all right if you can collect that so you can keep in your, you know, in your log. Because yeah, I get it, you know, you don't want to be a pompous jerk or whatever, but at the same time, you do need to recognize yourself for the value you bring to the world.
What was you said the Dunning-Kruger?
Dunning-Kruger effect, like Freddy Krueger. I don't know how to spell Kruger, so D-U-N-N-I-N-G Kruger, and I can't.
There's a hyphen.
There's a hyphen, yeah.
I have never heard of this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try my best to explain it.
You can do some more research first if you want.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. The Dunning-Kruger effect. It's the scale. Essentially, it's a scale that says no expertise, full expertise. Right? I don't know how y'all are seeing this, but no expertise, full expertise. The people with no expertise think they're the shit. They're all the way up here, 100% expert, they're the best. Whereas the person who is expert is actually somewhere down here and just thinks that the world's out to get them. And it actually is like this spike and then a curve through expertise. So like when you, like typically people who are suffering from Dunning-Kruger, they just start out and they're like, I'm the best at this thing, and then they realize it's like, life sucks. So that's what it sounds like you were talking about, the Dunning-Kruger effect, yeah.
Yeah, it's like encoding using Stack Overflow for the first time and seeing everyone else's answers after getting confident of your own, and it just really breaks it down.
Ooh, yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
This is just really back to your thing earlier with your father. This is a side note, this is kind of off topic, but did he ever have kind of like realization moment, like, wow, like my son has been doing some pretty cool stuff? Did you guys ever have?
Have we had that heart to heart?
Yeah, did you guys, was there ever a breaking point where he was like, oh, you know what, actually you are doing some good stuff, huh? You know?
Yeah. Kinda. My dad just gave up after a while. So when he realized that like I wasn't gonna become a lawyer or a doctor, yeah, he just he even if he didn't, it doesn't matter. I was realizing I was trying to impress the outside world, and as opposed to just doing what I loved and actually provide things that I find valuable and provide that to the world. I was doing it the other way around. So even having that conversation, have I had that conversation? I think I have. I don't know. I mean, we've definitely had our heart to heart, and I have a complete understanding of why he was the way he was. And he's not like that anymore. He's very supportive of me now. But yeah, as far as talking specifically about this, no, I don't think I've actually ever had that with him, but maybe I should. Thanks, doctor.
Do you guys, how do you like, I guess, tell the difference sometimes between like not being, like legitimately not being good at something and like you should maybe move on, and just like feeling like you're not and that you'll never get there, having imposter syndrome?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying like if it's the breaking point of like I should give this up, I really am an imposter and I'm never gonna get it, versus like I should keep working towards. I mean, I think that's a personal decision, right? I mean, like the only alternative I could think of is ask for feedback. Like look to somebody, like that takes a lot of guts and it's risky, but like if you really need the outside validation to know like am I wasting my time here or am I not? But I think the only other way you can do it is like, you know, set your own personal standards of like, okay, by this time if I haven't like gotten to this skill level, I'm calling it a day or something like that.
Yeah, your internal compass, checking your values, things that you value, checking where your high energy points and low energy points are. So the things that you do, like making a list of the things that you do that just amp you up, you're super excited about, and then write down the things that you don't like doing, and then actually comparing that. It's like, okay, is this thing that I'm doing fitting more with the things that amp me up, or is it taking my energy away? I think that helps.
And I know for me, like, one of the examples that I was thinking about is like, if I'm thinking about moving on from a job, for example, I know for me it's almost like, especially if it's not going as well as I want it to go, it's like, have I done everything I could? Do I feel like I've done everything I could to make this work? And then once I feel like I can answer that with a yes, then I can let it go. That helps.
That question really drummed up my story from when I was in New York, and I literally left without telling anybody, and that was one of the worst things I did to people and to myself, because I wasn't being honest with either party, myself or them. And I had to check in with myself, and I didn't, and I had to check in with others, and I didn't. So I think communication, and then we keep coming back to that, just let folks know what's going on with you. It's not as bad as you think it is. Most people can resonate, and most people, I haven't met a person who's not helpful, you know.
And most people want to help, they just need to know how.
Right.
And you're also in the perfect environment for it right now, right? You're all going through the same thing. It's probably going to get a little bit harder once you get outside and you're at your first job and you're with people who have a lot more experience than you. So, I mean, take advantage of talking about it now, talking to your instructors about it, talking to your cohort mates, and, you know, building up that network of support so you have it when you leave.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I know for kind of on a daily basis, Jerry mentioned meditation. I was wondering if you guys had any other like daily practices or habits, however small, you're like trying to cultivate in order to be more cognizant.
Yeah, I'm also a daily meditator, although I don't do it at 4:30 in the morning, closer to 8. That helps for sure. Also, a little journaling practice I've recently gotten out of the habit of, but used to help me a lot, and I'm gonna get back into it. Every day, right? I celebrate, I clear, I desire. So something you're happy about, something you want to clear from the day before, and something you want, like something you want to manifest.
Oh, I love that. I can't do meditation. I don't know. Maybe my brain's broken, but anyway, it's hard for me to meditate. So I try to find other activities that help me be more mindful. So reading is a big one for me. So it's like when I don't read, most nights of the week I feel off balance. So I prioritize my goal of like reading 28 books this year, and I've already read 28 books. I think I'm on 30. Just because I know how important it is to my self-care. But something else for me personally is, you know, being an imposter is like I deal with it all the time. I was even coming here and I'm like, why am I sitting on an imposter panel? Because I'm an imposter right now. But you know, I think it's like doing it for a higher purpose, right? Like a couple years ago, I had an experience where I felt called to be more visible, right? To speak more, to share my story more, to share my journey more, because I know there are other Black women out there in this industry, in this world, that don't feel comfortable enough to share their voice because they're not seeing enough representation. And so that is what keeps me going. That is what's like, okay, even if I feel shaky, even if, you know, I feel like an imposter, I'm gonna do this because I wanna pave the way for them. So that's something that helps keep me grounded.
So it's about all the time we have today. I hope you found value out of this event. Whether you have felt it in the past, do you feel it now, or might feel it in the future, you guys all as a community now have a mental model for what imposter syndrome is. We have the vocabulary for it. We're now empowered to support ourselves and each other from today on in designation in Flatiron and in our careers and in our industry. I want to thank our guest panelists. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to come. Thank you very much.
That was awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Would y'all mind to take a selfie with me?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Might be.
Position.
Are you gonna stand on the chair?
Yeah, so get in this area here.
Here we go.
It's already going in it? Alright.
All of it? Come on over here. And then we're gonna do the thing.
Yay!
Yay!
Get better at taking selfies. Good. I will share it. I will share it. Thank you so much.
Cool, thanks guys. Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Oh, Jessica.
It's nice to meet you. Yeah, I feel like we should like do some stuff like that. So experience since graduation.
I would love to.
Yeah.
Which group were you in?
Amethyst. Amethyst.
Oh, Amethyst. Oh, okay.
Which one were you in?
Hazel.
Hazel? So that was the first pass that we did.
Yeah, that was the first class in like 2015.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was like a while ago.
Yeah.
So it's like so weird like being back.
Yeah, man.
I thought.
And it's changed so much. I'm
I know.
sure.
I thought that it was gonna be the same. And I was like, oh, like I can handle this.
Yeah.
It was like totally different. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
I'll be in touch
Yeah,
afterwards.
I'd love to connect.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
No doubt. Cool.
All right.
You didn't stop recording before I did that.
Yeah,
I really
I'm trying to
remember all
figure
the
out how
friends
to
on
do
LinkedIn
that.
somehow.
It's in the
Are we really?
So I left